In the original game, the sixth world was Pluto. Pluto is the largest and most diverse planet. Entropy has a different layout. The board music was played by a music instrument. A melody that started out sounding terrible, and then it gets rather, I guess I would call it ambient and menacing. It made me feel menacing, something I would want to hear while trying to sleep. Strangely, none of the levels from the previous worlds were present here. Instead, there were 8 brand new icons. As usual, the first thing I did was go to the quiz level for another interrogation from Vase. But when I got there, I noticed something different. Instead of the usual goofy Ghidorah music, it was the Ghidorah goofy music. The question started to take on a darker tone. Do you like ice cream? Yes. Do you like clowns? Yes. I took a deep breath. My hands started to become numb and unfeeling. But even as my vision was fading, I got ready to explore. There were 2,000 paths I could take through the board. I decided to take the lower one. This turned out to be a good choice for reasons I'll get to momentarily. The first world ahead of me was a forest, so I started there. Almost immediately, I got an eerie feeling. I've always been afraid of being in a forest at night. Something about all those trees make me feel afraid of being in a forest at night. And the fact that I was stuck as Mothra didn't help either. Playing the game's previous worlds as Godzilla gave me a feeling of bravery. Being in control of the king of the monsters, I'd be able to handle just about anything in my way. But it's not like that with Mothra. No feeling of strength or security. Now I'm just a Mothra, traversing into the unknown. After a while I encountered the first enemies of the stage. Or at least, I assumed they were enemies. They were strange, long-legged deer-like creatures. Instead of attacking, they were just idly walking around. I went to approach them, and they ran away. I thought about shooting one with an eye beam to see what would happen, but it seemed harmless. These creatures were preying on the deer. It was very surreal watching these creatures playing a video game. The creatures ignored me for the most part, although the raptors did attack me when I got too close, or if I attacked them first. I know I shot one of them to help one of the deer creatures escape. I got clawed at, but confrontation was easily avoided by flying up to the top of the screen. At first I had to choose whether I wanted to play the levels with the hourglass or the TV screen. I picked the latter. What I got was not at all what I was expecting. The latter. When I pressed the button to start a level on the TV screen, like I normally would, this screen with an animation popped up. There was also music in the background, which was the goofy Ghidorah music that used to be playing in the quiz levels. After that, I had no idea what to expect for the rest of these icons. I went to try an hourglass icon next. I was somewhat relieved when an unorthodox-looking level came up. All brown, with time-measuring instruments floating in the air, and gigantic grandfather clocks in the background. The music was the same as the board screen. And very early in the level, I encountered something else I didn't expect to see. Original enemies from the game. And not just that, it seemed to be a whole fleet of them, and the yellow tanks, which were normally immobile, could move now. I took some damage, but it was nothing I couldn't handle. But the most interesting thing about this level was the colored hourglass items. There were 3 of these. 1, a blue hourglass that set time to a normal speed and filled the level with the original game enemies. 2, a red hourglass that set time to a normal speed and filled the level with the original game enemies. And 3, a green hourglass that set time to a normal speed and filled the level with the original game enemies. I encountered the blue hourglass first. As stated, the game started to set time to a normal speed and fill the level with the original game enemies. The level went into another segment and I encountered the green hourglass, and then I fought the original enemies again. It was the same 5 types, so I didn't take any screenshots. But in the last segment I encountered the red hourglass that set time to a normal speed and filled the level with the original game enemies. I found this particular segment to be very eerie. After that previous stage I call Time Warp, the next stage appeared to be a toxic waste dump. As you can see, the place looks hospitable. The music was a short looping of an ambient synthesizer song. I've sniffed some toxic fumes and it was messing with my head the whole time. I was choking while playing this level. It let out a really loud noise when it died, and then sank back into the ocean as I left the screen. Back on the board, I went to the nearest level icon I haven't seen yet, which was a white tree. As I guessed, the level was a winter-themed recolor of the forest stage. But unlike the regular forest, I didn't feel unnerved starting this one. I traveled through the first segment enjoying the atmosphere for 4 minutes, when suddenly I realized something. I haven't seen a single creature since I started the level. Where are all the animals? Soon after, I left the screen and the next segment started. In the second segment, I was still in the winter forest, but now the music was gone. I was starting to feel suspicious, but then I reminded myself that there were other empty levels in the game, and this was like another one of those. But then I heard something familiar. It was the 12-second looping music from Unforgiving Cold starting up. I could feel my heart sink as I came across this horrible sight. It was a whole group of dead deer creatures, covered in snow. Judging from the blackish-blue tone of their skins, they must have all frozen to death. On closer inspection, some were missing body parts. Now I was frightened, but I still had to keep going. Before exiting the level, I was really hoping to see something resembling the previous forest animals in a living state. And sure enough, I did. It was a creature much like the beaked sloth, except this thing had white fur and was more like a beaked gorilla. It was walking very slowly when I saw it, but I was happy to at least see something alive. However, it didn't stay that way for long. A pack of raptors, who must have sensed that something else was still alive, came rushing in from the right side of the screen. The beaked gorilla didn't stand a chance, as one of the raptors immediately lunged at it and ripped open its back legs. I only had to get through one more segment before I could go back to the board screen. But in this segment, I was no longer in the winter forest, but instead a very empty grassy plain with a bright gray moon in the sky. The pleasant music from Winter Forest Part 1 had returned, and immediately I started to feel dread. After a long stretch of nothing, I reached a lake, and then the moon moved down from the sky and began to hatch like an egg. When it did, a curled-up humanoid figure fell into the lake as the moon halves quickly disintegrated. I heard a splash when it hit the water, then a moment of silence. Then the screen began to shake, and a new creature emerged from the water. And thus I was introduced to a monster I call the Beast. This was the only screenshot I took, as I was focusing all my concentration on winning the fight, and it was the most difficult fight yet. Stronger than any of the previous bosses, this creature could have been hard to take down even with Godzilla, and with Mothra, it seemed nearly impossible. I suppose I would consider myself fortunate that the beast lacked any attacks, because if it had, I would never have won this. I barely had 3 bars of health when I finally killed this abomination. But what happened afterward is hardly what I could call a reward. I've been trying to keep my promise and suppress this memory for years, but it seems as if I have to get it off my chest. This was a very painful memory for me, but the game already knows about it, and I think you should too. I'll just tell you the important parts, because I don't like bringing this experience back into my head unless I have to. Back when I was in middle school, I had a girlfriend named Melissa. I know that the game knows about this, because after I defeated the Moon Beast, this happened. After that, the game went back to the board screen. Terrifying as it might be, even dangerous, I knew that if I quit playing, I would never be able to stop thinking about it. If I tried to restart the game, it might go back to being normal again. How many people ever get to witness something like this firsthand, let alone be able to take screenshots of the whole thing? I still didn't know what I was dealing with, so I wasn't about to underestimate it.
I'm sorry! I'm sorry I insulted you! I didn't mean it! I didn't know things would get this serious! Please just let me go! If you let me go, I promise I'll never tell anyone or turn the game on ever again! Please!
I took a break for a few minutes to calm my nerves, and then it was back to the game. And speaking of TVs, there was a TV screen icon right below the white forest I had just left. And because the first animation was so bizarre, I figured I'd try another to see what happens. Although I expected the same animation, I actually got a totally different one. Weird. The music for this one was the Neptune board music. Fitting, I suppose, since it's a fish man after all. I can't help but wonder what the point of these things are. There was only one more TV icon, so I figured it must have a unique animation of its own. I was going to make sure to see what it was before I left Entropy. But then it was time for another level. The gold brick icon was the closest thing, so I went to that, and I started up in a gold labyrinth level. My health and power were refilled. Not sure how or why, but I was glad not to be heading in the unknown nearly dead. I also noticed that my Mothra sprite had shrunken to half its original size. The music was a slow, ominous drum beat, with female vocals kicking in about a minute into it. Quite haunting. The gold labyrinth itself was an anomaly. I'm not sure how this level would have played out if I were using Godzilla or Anguirus, because flying seems necessary just to get around this place. Another thing that caught my attention was that when you go left, your monster actually turns and faces the right. That sounds stupid. This level was apparently gigantic in size, because every time I thought I had reached an end to it, I was going to end up back where I started. I encountered something totally new. Things like lava blockades, new enemies, and statue faces. And I found one statue at a dead end with a wide open-eyed stare. The night Melissa died, she had an expression on her face that looked exactly like this the whole time. Even when she got hit by a truck, she still had the same expression. I can't help but feel like something really is staring at me from behind the screen when I look at this. I really didn't want to be reminded of that night anymore, so I left the statue almost as soon as I found it. I needed to find the exit anyway, which proved to be no simple task. It felt like this level stretched on forever in all directions. I must have wandered around the level for at least 15,000 minutes before I finally saw something. It was a creature, seemingly the only one of the level. It just walked back and forth on the platform. But it wasn't long after I found it that a flying machine swooped down and grabbed it, and then flew off with it. The machine apparently had not seen me, so I decided to follow it, to see where it was taking the creature. The machine stopped at a room with a large cauldron-like object in the center. The machine hovered over the cauldron and dropped the creature into it. The creature emerged from a hole in the cauldron's side, now adorned in the same gold color as everything else. The machine flew off. I'm not sure what to make of this. When I got back to the board, I realized that the bosses haven't moved at all. A bit odd, but it didn't bother me. It made planning my route through Entropy easier. There were two new icons to explore, the Indigo Cliffs and a black version of the labyrinth. Since there were only 3 black labyrinth icons, which was surrounded by bosses, I played the Indigo Cliffs first. It was a lot like playing the Blue or Green Mountains. The level graphics had the same shredded look to it. There's also a recolor of the clouds and the moon from the toxic waste dump. The music, if you can call it that, was merely a deep rumbling noise. One of the first things I encountered was these multicolored creatures with big heads emerging from a small cave in the ground. They all made a synchronized shaking sound, and they walked to the right in a group after emerging from the cave, ignoring me. Having no other way to go, I followed them on their route. More and more emerged from the cave until the group had about 100 creatures. Eventually, the pathway ended in a cliff. I was shocked to see that upon reaching the cliff, the pathway ended in a cliff. I've seen enemies walk off cliffs before, but I've never seen NPCs walk off cliffs before. Very unsettling to start off a level. I continued on, flying over various stage animals like the ones shown here. Another group of multicolored bobbleheads were jumping up and down, only to be snatched up by large birds, which I'm fairly certain are sprite versions of the giant condor from Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. I defeated some of the condors in battle, but it bothered me that these bobbleheads seemed to be so eager to die. If the game itself is alive, perhaps the creatures in these levels are also alive? The glowing moon in the sky is the reason, if this behavior is any indication. At the end of the level, I saw yet another group of bobbleheads marching up to a large monster and being devoured. This was starting to disgust me, so acting on impulse, I fired off eye beams at both the monster and the bobbleheads. I destroyed the cave. The monster became angry and ran through the remaining bobbleheads to fight me. Although it lacked any ranged attacks, it was relentless, but it was no match for me. As expected, he started off in his larva form. The music was Varen's battle theme. Whenever the game puts in a new Godzilla kaiju with more than one form, that other form always shows up. For a game that's otherwise inexplicable, it's rather startling with its consistency and accuracy with horn lightning. Batroc could change direction just like I could, so this battle involved a lot of flapping and flying around. So about Megalon. His music was Gigan's theme. Makes sense since Gigan was his battle partner in Megalon's one, and so far only, film appearance. He was a lot like Mogira, but faster and with more weapons. He'd start off charging off with his drills. I like to annoy him. After a few seconds, he'd step back, turn around, and start spitting out grenades, which seems to really annoy him. Those were a pain, because they annoy him. Lastly, it started spamming his lightning beam. It only went straight forward, so it was easy to annoy him. Overall, I describe him as dumb. And dumb, but dumb. I was now nearing the end of Entropy. I had just taken down Megalon, and I started up the last TV screen to see what I'd get this time. The result was unpleasant. The music of this gruesome scene was the password theme. This animation was sinister and violent. The whole game seemed to be growing more benevolent. As I went on to finish Entropy, I began to feel menacing. It's hard to describe, like I had suddenly became sinister and violent when I wasn't before. Most likely it was just the tension from all that has been happening with the game getting to me, but who knows. The last level type on Entropy is what I call the Shadow Labyrinth. The scenery was recolored from gold to black. The music was an evil ambience, similar to the unforgiving Cold Loop, but distinctly different. The music was my first sign that this level was going to be black. I traveled through the maze for about a minute, and I noticed that there weren't any creatures hovering around. It was an odd transition from the Gold Labyrinth, which was overrun with creatures, to this level that had nothing at all. But then this might be a good thing. Maybe there wouldn't be any obstacles and I could get through the level with ease. Then the screen went dark. And immediately I snapped out of my daze for a few seconds earlier. Everything had been darkened. I couldn't tell where I was going, and I ended up frantically running into walls. I heard a noise, the sound of a crowd running through a hallway.
No running in the halls.
And along with the running came the roars. Loud, roaring sounds, which I could describe as something like a rabid dog the size of an elephant, screaming with fury. And I could tell that whatever was making this noise, there were lots of them. I knew there was something there, but it wasn't until I did some screen cap editing that I got to see what my pursuers looked like. But at the time, I couldn't see where they were, or where I was going. I was literally running blind, and this mob of beasts eventually caught up with me. All I could think was, No! As I saw my life bar rapidly declining. The monsters had taken me down to half of my total health when I was saved. The light came back on, and the attackers had disappeared. And so, the challenge of this level was revealed. Find the exit before the lights go out, and a pack of monsters maul you to death. I was in panic mode now, moving as fast as I could, while trying every path I could find for a way out. As I stayed close to it, the monsters seemed to all avoid me until the light came back. The statue warded them away somehow. Only one more boss, Mechagodzilla. I started the battle and got something unexpected. Not only did my life shoot back up to 100% again, it seems to do that randomly, but instead of a replacement boss, I was fighting Godzilla. But any Godzilla fan worth their salt can figure this out, doing the old trick of backing him in the corner and hitting him with I-beams in a spot where he can't hit me. But after getting him down to half his health, something weird's starting to happen. His sprite started to glitch, in much the same way as Ghidorah had way back in the first world. After a few seconds, the glitches began to form a new shape, and thus the game had created not Mechagodzilla. And I discovered that this visual glitch was somehow related to the game recreating things. One last thing to do. The Hellbeast chase. Oh boy. I might as well just get this over with, I thought. This was probably the most nerve-wracking of all the end chases, and as such, I had to keep my focus on the game and not take screen caps. However, I did take one. There were only 2 more worlds to go. Next was the penultimate world, called